Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, And with me is my good brother here in the temple, the man behind Distorted Illumination, good brother Monarch.
Yep, and today it's going to be a slight change of plans. We were going to be looking at a case of emergency, but instead, we're discussing Conan.
And I know somebody say, isn't this now twice that you've had to pivot? This one was quite literally last minute. When I say last minute, I'm talking I came across this on my feed at 8 a.m. this morning. And I was on the fence about whether or not I would do this as an emergency episode, like I did with Eldritch Automata, or if I would ditch in case of emergency and put this in the slot instead. But the more that I looked at in case of emergency, and the page count set up for it, I realized this would be a better fit for us. Plus, it would be more topical, since the Kickstarter for this is going to be coming in Q4 this year. Now, I haven't gone into it on the channel, but I have a long history with Conan and RPGs, to the point where I have actively considered doing a retrospective like I did for Star Wars and for Lord of the Rings. Because it's taken many forms. My first introduction was, of course, the D20 run with Mongoose, which for its time was very, very good, and I still say some of those old books are good for research material, even if it's using a slightly modified 3.5. But hey, it's Mongoose. Mongoose knows what the hell they're doing. And of course, I went back and looked at the old TSR Conan, the stuff that would later become Zephyr's, or Zeb's fantasy role-playing system, and the bad, the two Conan-themed modules. Actually, I think it two Conan modules and one Red Sonja module for AD&D. All three of them are and Unchained was not good. Now, fortunately, the Red Sonja one isn't drawing upon the Red Sonja movie. Thank God. But Of course, then fast forward a few years and we get the Conan 2D20 game, which I know some people really hate the 2D20 system. I never could really grasp what the hate was all about. Because I've seen people say that it's convoluted or something like that. And Crestfall, I need to clarify, I'm not talking about Unchained as in the Conan-leaning RTS. And Exiles is a survival game. I do not consider Exiles an RPG video game. I'm referring to Conan Unchained, which was a AD&D module from way back in the day. Like, the movies were still in circulation when that module came around. Because it was AD&D First Edition. So, just something I feel the need to clarify.
Yeah, in contrast to Mildred here, though, I do not have that much experience with Conan. Saw the original Schwarzenegger movie. Great.
Which has barely
I've not read
to do
the
with
book.
The books.
Oh, I'm aware.
Or the
I'm
comics.
kind of...
My introduction to Conan, period, was the comics.
Yeah. I'm kind of coming into this mostly just vaguely aware of the history of Conan. I couldn't give you specifics.
Yeah.
And again, I know the movie's not really that connected.
No, there are a lot of changes, largely to work around Arnold's limitations at the time. Because keep in mind that was only his second movie, and his first movie he was dubbed over. That was Hercules in New York. And he was overdubbed in post-production, which makes it sound very odd going back to it. But when it comes to and now we have Monolith, who for the last, I'd say, 6 or so years has done very well with the Conan board games, which are already borderline RPGs as it was. You know, I've mentioned this elsewhere, but I always find it funny when somebody looks at a certain TTRPG and says, "Oh, that feels too much like a board game," when board games and role playing games have been cribbing notes from each other for decades now. I mean, somebody clearly looked at Talisman and said, "Hey, that'd make a good RPG," and we ended up getting that. Gloomhaven is downstream from a full-on TTRPG, and that's getting the conversion treatment as well. But it is, of course, worth noting that this is done with the blessing of Heroic Signatures, who basically are the stewards for all things Conan these days. They're also responsible for the more recent comic after they got the comic rights back from Marvel. I think I only read maybe 1 or 2 of the Marvel comics. I just remember that for some godforsaken reason, Marvel decided to put him, Punisher, and a few other characters together as the Savage Avengers. Yeah, that didn't work out.
Look, Marvel, just because you own the rights to a comic doesn't mean it needs to be part of the same universe as all of your other comics. Mm-hmm. You can just let it be its own thing.
Yep. And now this Quickstart is currently available on Monolith's site, and the link is going to be in the description. And
I will say I really like the touch that it looks like a book, but every time you click a page, you actually see the page turn in the PDF. It even makes a little page turning sound, and that just makes me happy.
Mm-hmm. It goes, what? Obviously, we open with "Welcome to an age undreamed of." Now, I'm not going to read the full thing here, but I am going to read the famous opening. Know, O Prince, that between the years when the oceans drank Atlantis and the gleaming cities, and the years of the rise of the sons of Ares, there was an age undreamed of, when shining kingdoms lay spread across the world like blue mantles beneath the stars. Nemedia, Ophir, Brithonia, Hyperborea, Zamora with its dark-haired women and towers of spider-haunted mystery, Zingara with its chivalry, Koth that bordered on the pastoral lands of Shem, Stygia with its shadow-guarded tombs, Hyrcania whose riders wore steel and silk and gold. But the proudest kingdom of the world was Aquilonia, reigning supreme in the dreaming west. Hither came Conan the Cimmerian, a black-haired, sullen-eyed, with sword in hand, a thief, a reaver, a slayer, with gigantic melancholies and gigantic mirth, to tread the jeweled thrones of the earth under his sandaled feet. How could I not bring up that quote?
Yeah.
I mean, some of you may remember years ago I did a parody of that when somebody did an art of Santa the Barbarian. And obviously after that it goes into a bit of what sword and sorcery is, which you and I are already well familiar with, and that's not really the focus here. And then going into the Hyborian Age, which is the name of this incarnation of a Conan TTRPG, as opposed to the 2D21, which was Adventures in a Land Undreamed of.
Yeah, we'll also be skipping over pretty much this bit because it's just like, what is role-playing games? Stuff about Hyperion Age. Mm-hmm. Themes, just stuff we don't really need to worry about getting into details on.
Yeah. Obviously, then it goes into what is a role-playing game, which we skip every time because it's redundant. And then the core themes, This part I will read because it is going to be important for everything we're seeing. Conan the Hyborian Age has been crafted with the following principles in mind. Design pillars that informed every step of the rule's development and content creation. Adventure. Above all, the game is about fast and frenetic adventure, emulating the exhilarating momentum of Howard's stories. Big risk versus big reward. Fortune favors the bold, they say, and gameplay is designed to encourage risk-taking, dramatic action, and immediate rewards in the form of gold and glory. Sword and sorcery. This game is first and foremost a sword and sorcery game, that unique flavor of heroic fantasy, and adventures should revolve around opportunities for dazzling swordplay, often directed at diabolical magic. Forward momentum. Stories should never falter while characters don't know what to do, and even a loss is more temporary setback, opening new avenues for advancement. I like that they build it around a set of pillars. This is something that Zan and I have been trying to do since the early days of the FF Legend project, of having a set of pillars that everything springs from in terms of design. Obviously, it goes a little bit further in. It is, as far as the dice goes, it's using D6, D8, and D10.
It does say you also can use D4, 12, and 20, so it's basically a full set of dice.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So then we get to the making of a hero, and I'll let you take that part.
So the Quickstart includes some 5 pre-generated characters, allowing up to 5 players and 1 game master to get playing straight away. The following sections, the quick insight to various numbers and information. We'll start with stats. Each stat ranges from 1 to 8, though few humans possess a stat greater than 6. In addition to the value of a stat, each stat has an allocated stat die, which is usually a D6, 8, or in rare circumstances a D10. Each of the 4 stats are described here in detail. Might, measure of physical strength. Edge is a measure of a character's physical sharpness, deftness, intuition, alertness, dexterity, hand-eye coordination. It's used for situational awareness, avoiding detection, making attacks with ranged weapons. Edge is also used to determine a character's ability to avoid incoming damage and calculate their initiative during combat. We've got grit. It's a measure of a character's pain tolerance, stamina, constitution, and resistance to poison or the elements. It is used when trying to tough out the elements or overcome fear or intimidation. It is used to determine a character's total life and stamina, which allow a character to do more during any given situation. And wits. Wits measures a character's eloquence of speech, rhetoric, ability to decipher languages and symbols, knowledge base, deduction, and ability to read people and detect and tell lies. Wits is also used by sorcerers to decipher magical languages and, in some cases, enhance the effectiveness of spells. Some other values that are going to show up. Each character has values that must be tracked. These are all stated on the relevant sheets. We've got physical defense. It's a measure of a character's ability to defend themselves and is used during combat against melee or ranged attacks. Sorcery defense. Defense used to protect against and resist the effects of sorcery and dark arts, and is used whenever a character is targeted by a spell. Life points. Self-explanatory. Stamina points. Stamina points allow for versatile and spontaneous strategies, representing the skills of truly legendary warriors. Stamina points may be used during the game to provide a range of bonuses. Though there is no upper limit to how many stamina points a character can have, their available points will reset to whatever their grit stat is at the start of each tale. And flex die. The flex die is a special die that is rolled every time a character rolls a dice for any reason. When the flex die rolls its maximum value, it triggers a flex, which provides a number of boons for the character during that situation. We'll get into more of that later. We've got skills. Skills are what set the PCs apart from the common person. Typical PCs are above average warriors, rogues, sorcerers, or soldiers. They are people who defy odds, burn with life, and live to slay another day. Though human, they, like Conan, have the potential to become legendary for their strong bodies, keen minds, and silver tongues. Such prowess is represented by skills, the experience and finesse those who live by the sword learn throughout their tempestuous lives. For the purpose of this quick start, any skills possessed by a PC will be stated on the relevant sheet, giving some characters a boost in key areas or access to a specific ability that can be used during the game. In the full game, skills are gained through experience and are the key way that the character can develop. And for starting equipment, no adventurer or great warrior is complete without the tools of their craft. Each character profile provided with this quick start lists their equipment, along with any applicable rules. So yeah, we're not going to expect to really see too much on how to build characters here in detail, but it's a quick start, that's fine. As long as we get a good idea of how it plays.
Yep. So that brings us to the rules. First, starting with character types. Mostly goes into a character, player character, NPC, friendly, enemy, that sort of thing. It is worth noting that enemy characters are split into two types: antagonists and minions. Basically, mooks and non-mooks. Then it goes into the flex die. The flexibility die, usually referred to as the flex die, they put in die twice, represents how actions and attacks have a tendency to swing. That is, sometimes a blow results in a bruise, other times it results in a crushed skull. The flex die is an additional die that PCs must roll every time they roll dice unless a specific rule instructs otherwise. Players should be sure their flex die is distinct from the other dice they're rolling, so as not to confuse their results. A different color or motif, for example. So we're channeling the wild die. Got it. Then we have a side note. The following table references a number of rules that have not yet been discussed. Due to the flex die being a pivotal part of the game's core mechanic, we've chosen to introduce it as early as possible in the rules so players can better understand its implication for the various dice rolls they will make. Each person starts with a D10 flex die, but this can be improved by skills to a D8 or D6. Though the number of sides on the die gets fewer, this should be considered an upgrade because the likelihood of triggering the flex die is increased. Whenever a flex die roll result is the maximum value that die can roll, 10 for a D10, 8 for a D8, etc., a special effect called a flex is triggered. To be clear, the flex die's resulting number is not added to any totals, it is only used to trigger its effect or not. And they also note that a flex can still be triggered even if the check or attack rolled is a failure. Characters can spend a flex result in one of 3 different ways, and these options can depend on the type of roll a character is making. Flex die is only used by PCs, NPCs never have to roll a flex die. Makes sense. So you can spend it on stamina and immediately get 1 stamina point. You can spend it on as part of a check that fails so that it automatically passes. Though there is a side note saying some tales use a varying scale of success for checks, providing more notable outcomes for those who obtain a higher result. When using this flex result on these types of check, a character is assumed to have attained the lowest level of success. A pass, but only just. Which is fair. It is basically turning a failure into a bare minimum success, essentially. Which does give the implication of degrees of effect. And then massive damage. When a character scores a flex as part of a damage roll, they can choose to inflict massive damage. To do this, the total of the damage roll the total of the damage roll is normal, but also add to the total the maximum result that the weapon's allotted damage die could roll. If the weapon has a static damage value instead of a die, then double the damage instead. There was something akin to this with high crit in D&D 4th edition. Since crits just maximize die and no confirmation roll. Mostly because the confirmation roll was not the best idea. But some weapons had high crit, where if you crit, you would add an additional die depending on what tier you were at. So it is nice to see something like that here. Then it goes into checks. We should know what a check is. It's somebody from Czechoslovakia. No, I'm kidding. I do that joke a lot. Well, do you guys take Czechs? Yeah, we take Czechs, Germans, Swedes, and every other nationality. This is why I'm not allowed to answer the calls. But and of course, I appreciate that it makes note that you should only be rolling a check when there's a significant risk of failure. So no rolling spot checks every 5 feet just because you can. See, then a difficulty is assigned. The difficulty ranges are mundane, no difficulty, easy, 4 to 6, moderate, 7 to 9, tough, 10 to 12, and legendary, 13 plus. And there's also a sidebar about rolling a 1. When a character rolls a 1 on their stat die as part of a check or attack, that roll is immediately failed, even if the result of their stat plus 1 would usually meet the difficulty of the roll. A character can use their stamina points to increase the roll of a 1 to a 2 or more, or trigger the success flex die result, thus avoiding the failure. As NPCs do not have stamina points, they will always fail a check or attack when they roll a 1, unless they have a special rule that states otherwise. And keep in mind that if you're rolling, say, D6, that's a 1 in 6 chance that you'll automatically fail. So we have that high risk, high reward thing going on right here. But they also mention a rule of threes. Basically, when it comes to advantages and disadvantages, it should always be a range of 1 to 3. And assists, where other characters can assist you. More characters give you a higher bonus, which caps at 3. Some effects will give rerolls. A single roll can only ever be rerolled once. I like that. You don't have endless rerolls or keep rolling until you get it right. But that after contests, which work exactly how you think it would, then there is combat, and I'll let you take that. Monarch?
Oh, sorry. I double tapped my mute button and just remuted myself. So for combat, danger lurks in every corner of the Thurian continent. Foul creatures hide in the shadows, great beasts prowl the wastes looking for their next meal, and fury-driven tribes patrol their homelands, eager to best those who would wander too far onto their sacred ground. Whenever a brave warrior might journey, at one time or another they will find themselves needing to swallow the duress of combat. Few can explore the wilds without coming face to face with the blade. Of course, not everyone can fight like a veteran of many wars, but for those who choose to travel the continent, being able to protect themselves is not just a suggestion, it's essential. Whether be it by blade, hammer, bow, or even one of the mystical disciplines of sorcery, knowing how and when to strike may well be the difference between life and having your name drift into an age of memory. Rounds and turns. A single round includes all the actions of all the characters engaged in combat. Each character engaged in combat, including friendly and enemy NPCs, takes their turn by spending all of their actions. Once finished, another character spends their actions. Once every character has taken their turn, a new round begins and the character spends their actions, one character at a time once again. So for initiative, in combat, it's important to determine the order when combatants act. Characters take their turns. Whenever combat is imminent, the GM alerts the players. Let's see, where does it actually just say how initiative rolls? Because I think we all understand what initiative is.
Mm-hmm.
So it is an edge check. So an edge stat value plus die value, and adding any bonuses granted by skills and or other rule. There is no difficulty check for this. Players are simply trying to determine the value that will be compared to other combatants.
Mm-hmm.
And the GM should determine the initiative of enemy characters by making one roll using the lowest edge stat among all enemy characters. All of the GM-controlled forces will act in the same time in the initiative rotation based on this total. It is advised to record the GM's initiative value as well as the players. So all enemies act at once in this one. Alright. As an optional rule, the GM may make one initiative for all minions of the same type, and another for each antagonist, allowing them, like players, to use their own specified values. And during combat, all combatants act in descending initiative order, highest to lowest.
Which definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
Definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
I probably would house rule that actually no, I was gonna say how I'd handle flex, but then I remembered they didn't state that you're using flex for initiative. So I am operating under the assumption that you don't. Now, if flex can be used, I would go with the idea that if you trigger a flex, you can give yourself an extra turn during the first round, or an extra action during the first round. But it looks like good.
I was saying, I imagine if there's going to be initiative-based flex abilities, that will come up either in the expanded rules or possibly later, depending on the skills.
Yeah. After that is actions for player characters, and it shows an action, and it looks like we're using an action point system instead of action categories. You can perform 2 actions per turn, though certain skills and or stamina point spends can allow for more. You must use or lose all of your actions on that turn. You may not wait to see what an ally does and save an action for later, but during your own turn you can make your actions in any order you wish. So it's technically doing the half and full action, not far removed from Fantasy Craft, which is good. I like Fantasy Craft. I do have to wonder if it is a case where you cannot do the same type of action more than once. So I didn't see anything for that, because that brings the question of, is a +2 modifier really worth it instead of just declaring an attack twice?
Yeah. Yeah, it does say a character may perform the same action twice in their turn if they wish.
Alright.
I could see the +2 modifier mattering in certain situations.
Mm-hmm. Especially since numbers are kept pretty low.
Yeah.
Let's see, then we have the setup for actions for enemy characters, which is going to work in a similar manner. Then range, range is going abstracted based on zones. So if you've played, say, Savage Worlds, you're going to be familiar with this more theater of the mind affair. The ranges are touch, close, medium, long, and distant. and we have a nice little diagram, uh, as well as the concept of line of sight, which I don't know is how often is line of sight really compatible with theater of the mind?
I'm going to say it can be, but I'm going to say let's go ahead and read line of sight to see how they word it first.
Mm-hmm.
So, in order to make a ranged attack, the target must have line of sight to their target. That is to say, they must be able to see the character or object they are aiming at. While firing blind may seem cinematic, the outcome is rarely successful, and the GM should only allow such an action in very specific circumstances. It should also be noted that if a character moves out from cover in order to use a ranged weapon, they will be in a position where the enemy character can fire ranged weapons at them unless they have a skill or spend a stamina point to move back into cover.
Mm-hmm.
The GM should remain aware of this to prevent players attempting to pick off enemy combatants while remaining entirely hidden from view.
Yep.
So I'll say this makes sense in the system for how they're wording this.
Yep, and as mentioned, with an attack check, if you roll a 1, that's an auto fail. But with attacks and damage, you're making one of 3 categories of attacks: melee, ranged, or sorcery. Melee always uses the might stat. Ranged and thrown always use the edge stat, and sorcery always uses the wits stat.
I will answer Ethereal Dragon's questions. We are not likely to have an equipment list, so I do not know if this game will include bikini armor. I will assume yes.
You know, I know that everybody references that, but if you actually read the comics, Redstone doesn't wear that outfit as much as people think. Anyway, obviously damage it is in that same 3 category. However, in both melee, thrown, and ranged damage, the relevant stat is added to the damage. Sorcery, this is not the case. Which I hope we get an example of spells so we can see if there's a justification as to why sorcery isn't added to the damage value of a sorcery attack. Or rather, why the wit stat isn't added. And if the target has an armor rating, subtract that value. So we have armor as soak. Good. Then modifiers and conditions, which focuses on the rule of 3, which we already talked about. Focused attack, which is +2, and defend, which is +2 to physical defense. As well as a few example modifiers, and then armor and armor rating, and I'll let you take that.
Alright, so each type of armor has an armor rating value, which is a measure of the protection it provides. After an attack hits the target and damage has been calculated, the target of the attack should abstract their armor rating value from the damage inflicted to determine the total damage they suffer. The minimum damage rule. If a character hits the target with an attack, the target will always suffer at least 1 damage regardless of their armor rating. Each of the various armor types are described in the following table, which includes these categories: specific make, the AR, stipulations, which are any rules, requirements, or limitations imposed on the character while wearing the armor. We got a quick little list of light, medium, and shield.
Mm-hmm.
I will note that, for example, light armor will give a -1 to all sorcery attacks, -2 to medium, so we're going with some penalties to using magic while armored.
Pretty much. And I'd imagine the rule of 3 applies when it comes to heavy armor. Then we have weapons. The details of the weapons of each weapon is going to be on the character sheet or NPC profile. But we have the type of weapon, the maximum range that it can be used at. Enemies beyond that range cannot be targeted. The damage, though you have to keep in mind that you're adding the relevant stat with some weapons, and any special rules. Then life, death, and the will of fate. Each player character's overall health and well-being depends on their life points. During the game, the value a character starts with is considered the maximum number of life points they may have. When a PC's life points reach 0, they hit the ground in a heavily wounded state, unconscious or barely clinging to life. When this occurs, a PC must immediately pass a grit check, difficulty 8. A player may use a flex result to apply success to a failed grit check, as usual, and a GM may apply modifiers using the rule of 3 as applicable. If this check is failed, the PC has died gloriously in battle, and their adventures through the Hyborian Age have come to an end. If, however, the PC passes the grit check, they will remain in an immobile and vulnerable state until their allies have eliminated the immediate threat and the current combat has ended, after which the PC is restored to 1 life point. If all allies end up in this state before the end of battle, then with no one left to deliver suitable aid, all PCs are considered to have fallen foul of their injuries and are killed, unless the GM deems it a suitable moment for a fateful intervention. Fateful interventions, which is a sidebar on the next page. When a PC is killed in battle, or when all PCs are reduced to 0 life points during a combat, the GM should decide whether to allow these characters to perish or provide a fateful intervention. Conan's world is brutal and violent, and the occasional death of a character should be expected. However, where a character is pivotal to the ongoing story, or where the GM is just feeling generous, a fateful intervention can be used to add a narrative reason for saving a character. And they give a few examples of it. And we have enemy life points. Antagonists have life points, minions do not. Minions instead have thresholds, which they go into next. Unlike player characters and enemy antagonists, minions do not have life points. Instead, minions have a threshold value. This is the amount of damage that needs to be inflicted with a single blow in order to kill the minion outright. If a successful attack inflicts an amount of damage equal to or greater than the minion's threshold, then that minion is immediately killed. If the attack inflicts an amount of damage less than the minion's threshold, then the GM should note that the minion has been hit. Any subsequent attack that inflicts at least 1 damage will kill that minion. In the interest of maintaining a brisk pace in combat, and to reduce the mental load on the GM, minions don't have AR scores. A threshold effectively emulates the benefits of armor and general toughness. So, swarm rules for minions. Makes sense.
Indeed.
So then we have recovery. As standard, you can take 2 recoveries per tale/game session. And a recovery lets you tend to your wounds, relax your muscles, and so on. When you use it, you get 1 stamina point and half of your maximum in life points back. So we have healing surges done in the way that they're supposed to be done. See, then stamina points, which we already explained what stamina points are. A PC may spend stamina points as they wish on their own turn, or where applicable, on an opponent's turn. These options allow for versatile and spontaneous strategies, representing the skills of truly legendary warriors. The effect of spending a stamina point apply immediately. You start the tale with a number of stamina points equal to your grit stat. And then we have a list of what it can do. You can spend 1 to make an additional move action, spend 1 or 2 to increase a check or attack result after the roll by 1 or 2, increase damage by 1d4 or for 1 point, or 2 points to do 2d4, increase the range of a thrown weapon by adding 1 additional range zone or 2 additional areas. Or spend a character's final stamina point when rolling for damage to apply the maximum massive damage flex result. The character should still roll the flex die as normal. If they roll the flex, they may apply massive damage a second time. Alright, so stamina is your extra effort, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be some character-specific uses for it as well. Let's see, then poison, which goes into the effects of, well, being poisoned. And then we get sorcery, and this one's going to be a bit lengthier, so I'll let you take this.
Yep. Alright, so sorcery is an ancient and often dangerous art learned and practiced by acolytes or individuals who pore over lost books, perform sacrifices, or commune with demons and otherworldly beings. In some cultures, sorcery is revered and respected, but in many lands of the Hyborian age, it is something to fear. Though sorcery can overcome mundane magic, it also includes incredible and devastating powers that can change the course of a battle or the fate of the caster. So for the actual art of casting spells, using a sorcery skill costs the caster a number of life points or stamina points, representing the significant drain the sorcery has on the user when casting a spell. Most spells also require the use of a number of actions during combat, as specified by the spell's rules. Outside of combat, a GM is free to determine exactly how long it takes to cast a spell. Any additional requirements for casting a spell, such as a target being within a certain range, will be detailed in the spell. So, sorcery disciplines and inherent spells. Each sorcery skill is connected to one of 5 disciplines. For the purpose of the Quickstart, the pre-generated character, Daver, has access to the White Magic discipline. Each discipline also contains a number of inherent spells. These spells do not have specific rules and instead provide a number of magical narrative tasks that the sorcerer can achieve. Inherent spells are considered to be known by any sorcerer who also possesses at least one sorcery skill from the given discipline. For example, because Davor possesses a white magic sorcery skill, he also has access to the list of white magic inherent spells. So white magic. Life comes in many forms. For those who walk the wilderness to the ancient trees in the continent's densest woodlands. From the smallest creature on the desert floor to the weather thundering high above. Sorcerers who embrace these energies may learn to understand the feelings of those around them, to sense magical potential in others, and to speak to the many beasts that roam the world. White magic is a study of life, healing, and nature, combined with a deep understanding of all aspects of sorcery. So we have the white magic inherent skills. The signs of Jabal Sag. Or Sag, maybe, I don't know. Sag sounds better, I think. The sorcerer can read and write symbols that can only be understood by beasts or those who remember the ancient language. In addition, the sorcerer can read the emotions and intent of any nearby animals, though the sorcerer cannot command or influence them. Sense sorcery. The sorcerer can sense sorcery being used nearby and is able to tell if an item or person is under the effect of spell by placing a hand upon the item or upon the person's bare skin. And life sight. The sorcerer can determine the physical and mental well-being of any living creature by placing a hand upon their bare skin. This includes knowledge of any harm they have suffered, pain they are in, fear they are under the effect of, or emotional state they may be in. Then some names. We got healing. Spend 1 stamina point and use 2 actions to heal. The sorcerer or another target within touch range regains life points equal to the sorcerer's wit die. A sorcerer must be able to lay their hands on the target's bare skin to use spell on another character. And Call Wolf. Spend 5 life points. Use 2 actions to call a wolf. See the Dave character sheet. 2 within medium range, which acts as a friendly character until it is defeated or the current combat ends, at which point it will flee. The wolf shares the same initiative as the sorcerer. The wolf may take a turn immediately after the sorcerer on the turn it is summoned.
So,
yeah, after that, we're basically getting into game mastering, which
is something.
A quick glance is something we're not going to need to worry about.
Yeah, it is worth noting that wealth and possessions is abstract, which for the source material makes sense. Then right after that is the module, the Seal of Acheron, which we're definitely not covering because that is spoiling. I will note that it sets itself up in a scene-based setup, which I honestly prefer compared to the typical dungeon crawl. And then right after that is the pre-gens. And it looks for the first one we have Hanzi, who has a life points of 30 and a stamina point of 4 and a flex die of D10. The thing to note with the sheet is each of the 4 stats has a static value and a die rating. And based on what I'm seeing, I would guess that either you only level up the static value and the die size goes up after you have a total that's past that die size, or you have to level them separately. I think it's going to be more of the former than the latter.
I agree, though I will say for every character sheet, the stats range from 3 to 6, and the dies are all D6s on all character sheets for every stat.
Yeah.
So if that's how it's going to do it, it's going to probably be once you hit 7 on a stat value is when the die goes up.
I also couldn't help but notice that when it comes to the skills, they're not skills in the traditional sense. I'd say they're more akin to what would be feats or talents in other games.
Yeah, like when I read off healing and call wolf earlier, those are under skills.
Mm-hmm.
Sorcery skills specifically.
Which also means, regardless if you're using some martial technique, some thievery skill, or using a magical effect, it's still treated as a skill for all intents and purposes.
A very simple character sheet.
Mm-hmm. And of course, when it comes to defense, you have physical and sorcery. So if somebody's trying to hit you, that's what they have to roll. And just as an example, using Gudrun, if I say, okay, make a might check, that would be D6 plus 5. And then after
it ends with a nice little map.
Yeah, a very nice map of the Hyborian Age that I'd love to have as like a felt poster. And that pretty much covers all of it.
I'll say I don't have like very strong thoughts on what we just read. It's interesting. I'd definitely like to see what more you could do with this system when they release the full book eventually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The vibe that I get out of this is that this is very much leaning into a crunch light affair. While in fact it outright calls it a light overview of the setting.
Yeah.
And because of how this is set up, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that this is not gonna be using a class or archetype system. I think it's gonna be. I have a feeling it's gonna be. You pick your origin, you get a bonus from your origin. Then you pick a. You get your starting spread of stats, and then you pick skills. There's the possibility that it might use archetypes in the same way that, say, Savage Worlds uses archetypes. More broad packages, or even starting packages for that matter. But since we don't know how advancement is going to work, we can't say for certain. I do think advancement is going to be semi-freeform.
And I will say at the Real Dragon, we haven't heard anything about in these roles about going insane from using too much.
No, that's not how. This isn't Call of Cthulhu spellcasting. We didn't even see a sanity system.
Yeah, so I don't expect that to happen.
I expect what you're doing. What we're doing instead is you cast from HP.
Yeah. HP or stamina, depending on the spell, or possibly if you're out of stamina, it'll let you start drawing from HP. One of the two.
Probably both, if I'm being honest. And in fact, with the healing and White Wolf spell, healing spends 1 stamina point and costs 2 actions. Call Wolf spends 5 life points and also uses 2 actions.
Yeah, so it's going to vary on the spell.
Mm-hmm. And since there's 6 different skills, I will note that I've always appreciated the idea of schools of magic being treated as individual skills, since it gives a bit more weight to the naming of those subtypes. As opposed to it being there mostly for flavor in some games. I probably would, as it is, I'd probably house rule the idea that if it would require stamina points, you could either spend 5 or 10 life points to act as a substitute, or and this is something that might be real interesting, and I'd be more likely to try. You roll the flex die. If you trigger a flex, you get a freebie. If you don't trigger a flex, you spend a number of life points equal to what you rolled. It might take a little bit of work to finagle it, especially once the flex die goes down. But I'd have it that you can only use that if you're required to spend stamina points and you don't have any. And normally that would be a problem, but it is mitigated because of the fact that one of the ways you can spend a flex die is immediately getting back stamina.
Yeah.
Plus, you have the fact that the recoveries that you have, even if it's just 2 of them, you can use them to get a stamina point back. Now, granted, again, it's only 1 point that you're getting back out of this, but I have the distinct impression that you're not expected, even late game. I don't think people's stamina points are going to be going into the double digits.
Yeah.
But for those who found some of the previous Conan RPGs a bit too crunchy, I think this has more potential to be a good fit. I'm not surprised to see the D12 getting used, given Shep is involved, and in fact, this is very much reminding me of the Gaia Complex, which that'll be fun when Zan and I get to that in August, since that's what we're going to be covering after we finish Gubat Bunwa. But overall, would you say that that the Hyborian Age is in that same um medium light level of crunch that we saw with Outgunned.
And this sounds like about a good area to put it in.
Mm-hmm. I'd say Outgunned is a little bit lighter.
Yeah, I would put this at a bit heavier than Outgunned.
But only just.
Yeah. That said, that's based off what we've seen in the Kickstarter. That could change, but I don't expect it to change by much at all if it does.
No. I think a lot of this is them carrying over what they were doing with the board game anyways, which used different dice but wasn't exactly what you would call crunchy about it.
As I said, I don't think there's a lot here that's going to like blow anyone's minds or anything, but it's enough that it looks like it'd be a good game and interesting. Mm-hmm. Someone wanted to play it and brought it up when it comes out. I'm like, yeah, I'll give this game a shot.
Mm-hmm.
Again, though, I do like a bit more crunch in my stuff. So if you're not like me, this might be a lot more interesting to you.
Yeah, but this is the crunch light and crunch heavy. I don't think is the best word to go with the description of what this game is doing and what Outgunned was doing. I think the better word is cinematic crunch, because it's very clear that the game constantly wants you to be doing something.
Yeah.
I know that some people in the ivory tower call this the tyranny of fun, but that strikes me as nothing more than a cope.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Something vibrating over there.
Yeah, I think someone was texting me. Don't worry too much about it. It's because I'm using my Yeti and my phone's right next to it. I should probably have it on note to self. Have it on silent. I didn't know that that was gonna pick up.
Oh yeah.
But right now I'm willing to skew towards recommended. We will see. If it stays that way once the Kickstarter happens.
Like, I definitely expect there to be a bit more complexity added in from what we've seen when the full thing launches. I think they're going out of their way to try to keep it as simple as they can.
Well,
for right now,
standard fare for a quick start.
Yeah.
I do have to wonder, why didn't they put? And maybe this was put out for it, or maybe it was late, but free RPG Day was Saturday. I don't know. Maybe somebody was winning the Doku challenge that day.
It's possible it just wasn't quite ready, and they're like, I think we'd rather make sure this looks good at release. Give it a couple more days. Screw trying to rush it for free RPG Day.
That is certainly a possibility. But
if that's the case, I'm glad they held off.
Mm-hmm. But with that said, I think that is going to do it for this particular episode. Next week we'll be starting our brand new season covering Mysteries of the Yokai. I think that'll be our first full freeform one in quite a bit. And of course tomorrow, as I said earlier, it's going to be back to Gubat Bunwa, because it's not until mid-July that the proper quick start for Shadowscar will be available digitally, at least according to our Telsorian site. So I had to pivot on that. This is why they always say cards subject to change. But we've got that coming. I know. You and I are finally going to be doing the adventures early Saturday afternoon, and after that is going to be the one shot with Tanner Walker revisiting Heavens and Heresies, which has had some significant changes and refinements since you last touched it. And of course, this Sunday will be the return of Geek Watch. So please look forward to all of that. But until then, on behalf of the Good Brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.